What's the discovery in the recent years that I think everyone needs to know about? I blabbed a lot about dopamine. I blabbed a lot, okay, get some sunlight, please. The anterior mid-singulate cortex is this brain region that I knew about. I teach neuroanatomy to medical students, do it every January. Did it this last January, do it next January. Taught it for years. The anterior mid-singulate cortex, neuroscientists knew was there. They didn't know what it did. It's an area that gets inputs and outputs from a lot of different brain areas, like a hub. It gets inputs from the dopamine system, serotonin system, motor system. It's like interconnected with a ton of stuff. But a colleague of mine at Stanford, Joe Parvizi, is a neurosurgeon, is operating on a patient and stimulating different brain areas and gets in and starts tickling neurons with an electrode in the anterior mid-singulate cortex. And the patient, and it turns out every patient where he does this, says, I feel like there's a storm coming at me, but I'm going to go through it. Or I feel like something's about to happen, but I can lean into it. Okay, interesting. Moves the electrode back a few millimeters, totally different picture. Okay, so this is super interesting. The anterior mid-singulate cortex increases in size when people take on hard challenges on a consistent basis, decreases in size when they don't. It increases in size in successful dieters, exercisers, people taking on a new skill. It's maintaining size, unlike in other people. It maintains size in a group of people called superagers. It's a bit of a misnomer because what are superagers? Superagers are people that maintain cognitive ability late into life. They're constantly learning, taking on new challenges. Okay, the summary that we now have is that the anterior mid-cingulate cortex is a brain area that's highly plastic, that grows, that becomes active and that can actually grow under conditions where we lean into things that we don't want to do. So if you love working out, sorry. You love reps to failure. I love reps to failure. I came up training like under the Mike Menser thing, although I add a few more sets and a bit more frequency, the kind of Dorian Yates.
You're wasting your time.
And it worked for me. It's like, it's what my body reacted best to given my time constraints, and like it's what worked best for me. I occasionally do a little bit more volume, but that's what works for me to get stronger. So training that way isn't going to do it. But you send me out on a 5-mile ruck on a day with like just this amount of water, that sucks. Might even be dangerous, but we'll probably survive if it's not too hot. If it sucks and you do it anyway, your anterior mid-cingulate cortex gets bigger and it transfers to other aspects of life. And this is something that I think we've missed in the do hard things thing, is we missed that the hard to you, it's not sufficient to just do something that other people think is hard. If you love getting in the cold plunge, it's not doing as much for your anterior mid-cingulate cortex as if you hate getting in that thing. So I think it's beautiful. I think it's beautiful that neuroscience discovered this. I do feel like it landed on my lap to tell everybody about it. I'm going to blab about it until until they tell me to stop or they stop me, or give me a tracheotomy, and then I'll probably just be like, your mid-cingulate cortex. But the point being that this thing does not care about the stuff you want to do that's hard. If you love grinding reps to failure, you'll benefit. Clearly there's benefits to that exercise, but it's the stuff you hate. It's if you're a talkative person, you want to be right, and you sit down and you're going to do I got to listen for 97% of the conversation. It's that. That's where the growth is. And the great news is this area is so interconnected that it's clear that it carries over to other types of behavior so that you can tackle other things that you would otherwise avoid. Then the last point is that this thing about the superagers is not trivial. It very well may be that the brain is paying attention to our efforts to absorb new information and grow itself. And the brain, of course, controls the body. We know that. The body talks back to the brain, but the brain largely controls the body. And there's some interesting data based on the longevity stuff. And here I'm not talking about living to be 200. I think genetic limit for aging is probably 120. And then there's variability in there, depending on genetics and lifestyle, et cetera. But what ends up happening, it seems, is that this brain area is also related to the will to live, the desire to keep pushing. And, if ever there were an appropriate place to talk about this, it would be here. Because I think when I hear about buds, or when I take Costello out to Coronado sometimes and he'd run around, and I'd see guys out there doing their thing, like clearly they're trying to find their who's going to ring the bell. They're trying to find the people that can learn to do the thing they hate anyway. And I think I got a few things wrong early days of the podcast, not scientifically wrong, but I put so much emphasis on learning to make the effort the reward, which it can happen. But what we missed out on is that like sometimes the effort's supposed to suck. And maybe, probably, and based on these data on the anterior mid-cingulate cortex, certainly when the effort sucks, you're really benefiting. So I keep that in mind a lot, and it scares me and I hate it. And I guess that's exactly the point.
Well, there you go. That's a good bookend. Yeah. Because we talk about doing what you want to do and doing what you love to do, but you still got to do things you don't want to do. Probably a pretty good place to wrap. Echo Charles.
Yeah, sorry.
You got any questions?
We're not wrapping yet.
Okay, well, I figured you had some questions over here.
Wait. So we didn't go into the neurotic part of it. So we were talking about OCD, but then what? So then what's a neurotic thing? Because I thought neurotic. I guess I was getting them kind of.
Yeah, well, this is kind of fun because the word neurotic actually used to be what the Freudian and Jungian analysts would consider healthy. They said the best you could be was neurotic, and what you want to avoid is being psychotic. That's the kind of old school language. And keep in mind what we think of as neurotic now, they might have thought was different, maybe just like of the neurons or something. I don't know. Neurotic people as a stereotype are people that like are very effusive and kind of like can't be satisfied by anything. There's always some underlying dissatisfaction. But we have to be careful because that itch is what drives us. And sometimes someone can be really neurotic but quiet. I work with a guy who likes to tell me, he goes, yeah, I'm like a cat in a room full of rocking chairs. And I'm like, you're the calmest dude I know. He's like, yeah, I'm stressed all the time. So people hide it well. People hide it well. So I don't have a lot to say about it except that I think neurotic people and people that are just anxious in general, I mean, I'm with Jocko on this one. Do more. Tire yourself out. Like, yeah, I mean, there's some dogs that are just like tail always going. They need a lot of running. And then there are the Costellos that were just like super chill. And like economy of effort is the name of the game.
So, for example, I know a guy, we went over to his house for Christmas. It was me, my friend, the kids. So they had a Christmas tree. The ornaments around the Christmas tree wasn't the fragile kind of ornaments. It was just like regular ornaments. And one of the kids was over there by the Christmas tree, like kind of pawing at one of the ornaments. And the guy didn't know the kid. It was the first time, he had been introduced to the kid and the dad. They were just kind of guests at the house. And he was like, you could tell he was really bothered about the kid, almost, I don't know, disrupting the ornaments or whatever. Maybe, I don't know. I don't think they could break, but he was like, hey. Almost like he lost control of himself because of that scenario. And I was like,
does he have kids of his own?
No.
Yeah, it sounds like having had kids living with me before, it's you just have to embrace that, like, stuff's gonna get dirty, stuff's gonna get broken. Embrace the wildness. It's like a punk rock show.
I thought at that moment I was like, okay, because it had nothing to do with me. It wasn't my kid. Was my ornament. I don't care. I'm an observer. But I was like, oh, that guy seems a bit neurotic because that doesn't move me either way, even if it was my ornament.
Yeah.
Is he neurotic?
He's uptight.
Or just uptight. Okay. So uptight is like the mild.
I mean, one thing we know for sure is trying to, control the behavior of others or get them, like life's got to be pretty challenging for that guy.
Yeah,
just day to day kind.
Yeah. I mean,
he's not a happy camper, bro.
No, the world's full of havoc and like stuff isn't aligned and that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. I mean, some people have the counting obsession thing. Yeah. But yeah, that sounds like he's uptight. I don't know that we could diagnose him, but I'm calling him uptight.
Uptight. Okay.
Little uptight, yeah.
So that's like the street version of neuroses? Is that the word?
Yeah, nowadays people are using these terms like neurotic and narcissist. And like, I mean, all these accounts on Instagram, like people calling each other names. It's like people have given themselves like the authority to use DSM diagnoses. I mean, it's kind of wild. Then again, I'm a guy who talks about dopamine and serotonin, but those are real things, right? That, exist in all of us. I mean, I think the clinical definitions of these things become really important. We have to be careful because we will erode the importance of like real psychological diagnosis. We're like, you're obsessed, you're OCD, or someone's calling them like, well, you're whatever. Like, I think we have to be very careful about not drifting into that.